Welcome, everyone. It's your Sleepy Psychologist, and I'm so glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're in bed, maybe you've dimmed the lights, or maybe you're just searching for something a little quieter, something slower, because tonight we're stepping away from the noise and into the strange, soft corners of thought. We'll explore one of the mind's biggest mysteries, something that might shift the way you see yourself, the world, or even reality itself. Before we begin, consider liking this video and maybe even subscribing, not just for me, but so this little corner of peace can find others who need it too. Now take a deep breath. Let the day dissolve. Let your thoughts get curious and your mind get quiet. You're exactly where you're meant to be. Now, let's begin. Sometimes, late at night, or in a quiet moment, a strange thought floats through your mind. It's soft, not loud or scary, but it lingers. You might be sitting in your room, walking outside, or staring at the ceiling, and it just shows up. It says something simple, something that makes you pause. What if nothing really matters? Not in a sad way, not even in a hopeless way, just a quiet question that seems to come from nowhere. And in that moment, the world feels a little different. The noise fades, the rush of daily life slows down, and you're left with that gentle feeling like you've stepped out of the usual rhythm for just a second. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It doesn't mean something has to change. It just means your mind is asking something it's never said out loud before, and that's okay. Most of the time, we're told that everything has a reason. We're told we should find our purpose, that life is supposed to mean something big. We grow up hearing that things happen for a reason, that there's a path we're meant to follow, or a goal we're supposed to reach. But sometimes, deep down, there's a little wondering, what if there is no path? What if there's no big reason? What if we're just here? That can feel like a scary thought, but it can also feel strangely peaceful. Because if nothing has to mean something, then maybe there's less pressure. Maybe we don't need to figure it all out. Maybe it's enough just to be here for a while. Think about the stars for a moment. They shine so far away. They're beautiful, but they don't care if we see them. They don't need a reason. They just shine. And maybe we're like that too. Maybe we don't need a perfect meaning to have a life that matters to us. Maybe we don't need to explain everything to feel real. There's something calming in that. Like setting down a heavy bag you didn't know you were carrying. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase anything. You're allowed to rest. Doubt isn't always a bad thing. It doesn't always mean something's wrong. Sometimes it's just your mind opening a door to a bigger question. And that question doesn't need a quick answer. It just wants to sit with you for a little while. Maybe you've had moments where things felt empty, where the world felt too big, or your place in it too small. But that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're thinking deeply. It means you're human. And maybe deep thinking is something we do best when things are quiet, when the world slows down and gives us space to feel. This moment you're in right now, it doesn't have to lead anywhere. It doesn't have to become anything. It can just be what it is, a moment of stillness, a soft breath, a gentle wondering. Sometimes we're so busy trying to be okay that we forget it's okay not to know. It's okay to rest in the middle of the question. Not everything needs to be solved. Not every thought needs to be finished. So if you're feeling that little whisper of doubt tonight, don't fight it. Don't push it away. Just let it be here with you. Let it sit beside you like a quiet guest who doesn't need to speak. You don't have to have answers. You don't have to explain anything. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're just here. And that, in this moment, is enough. And so the whisper lingers, softer now, but still present, not demanding, not sharp, just there, like a thought left behind after a dream. You don't chase it, but it follows anyway, and somewhere inside, a word begins to form. A word you may have heard before, maybe whispered in a philosophy book, or spoken in passing like something too heavy to hold for long. That word is nihilism. It sounds cold at first, unfriendly, strange. But as with many words that make us uneasy, when you stay with it, sit next to it, and simply listen, it begins to soften. It becomes less like a threat and more like a question, less like a wall and more like a doorway. At its core, nihilism is the idea that life, the universe, all of this, has no built-in meaning, that there's no hidden purpose behind the stars, no cosmic reason waiting to be revealed. It suggests that the meaning we search for might not exist beyond us, that it's not floating out there in the sky, waiting to be found, and maybe never was. That thought can feel like a collapse at first, a sudden emptiness where meaning used to sit. But give it time, and it becomes something else. Not the end of the story, but the space where a different kind of story begins. The word nihilism comes from the Latin nihil, meaning nothing, and yet that nothing doesn't always mean despair. It doesn't mean screaming into the void or falling endlessly. Sometimes nothing simply means quiet, a blank page, an open field, a space without rules where no one is watching, no one is grading, no one is waiting for you to get it right. It's strange how freeing that can feel. When you realize there's no cosmic test to pass, no hidden scorecard to measure your worth, something in you loosens. You can stop trying to be something you're not. You can let go of the pressure to have it all figured out. You can just be. For some, nihilism arrives like a thunderclap, loud, sudden, and full of fear. It might come after a loss or during a long night or when old beliefs begin to slip through your fingers. But for others, it comes like a slow drift, a quiet curiosity that builds over time, and eventually it stops being scary. It just becomes part of the air, part of the way you see. Not everything needs a reason. Not everything needs to mean something more. A flower can bloom, not because it was told to, not because it's part of a plan, but simply because it can, because conditions allowed it, because life, even without instructions, still rises, still unfolds, still breathes. And so do you. Some people think nihilism means giving up, that if nothing matters, then why do anything at all? But that's not the only way to see it. If nothing is fixed, then everything is possible. If there's no given path, then you're free to walk in any direction. You're free to care, free to love. Not because the universe demands it, but because you choose to. You decide what feels true to you, and that can be powerful. That can be beautiful. In a world where nothing is guaranteed to matter, the things you care about, your quiet joys, your deep connections, your small kindnesses, become even more precious. You don't need permission to value them. You don't need a rule book to follow. You just need to listen to yourself, to your breath, to the way the world feels when you're not trying to control it. Nihilism, in this way, is not a dead end. It's not a wall. It's the wind that blows everything open. It's the silence that lets you hear your own voice for the first time. It's the space between what you were told and what you've come to know on your own. And when that space is held gently, it doesn't lead to nothing. It leads to stillness. And in that stillness there is room for peace, for thought, for quiet acts of meaning that don't need the stars to bless them. Just you, just this moment, just the soft possibility that maybe, even if nothing was written for you, you still get to write. The whisper stays with you, no longer strange, just part of the air now. And slowly, as your thoughts drift through it, you begin to wonder, where did this come from? Not just in your own mind, but in the minds of others. Surely you aren't the first to feel this quiet emptiness. Surely someone else has stared into this open space and asked the same quiet questions. And you'd be right. These thoughts, this gentle unease with meaning, this drifting sense of the unknown, aren't new. They've echoed through minds and centuries, whispered through dusty books and long-forgotten evenings, passed down not with panic, but with curiosity. In many ways, nihilism isn't just a modern word. It's an ancient feeling, one that humans have carried with them long before they ever had a name for it. Even thousands of years ago, there were those who looked at the world and didn't see a grand purpose, but rather a cycle, a pattern, an endless repetition of rise and fall, life and death. Some early Eastern philosophies leaned into this, accepting impermanence as the nature of things, not something to fear, but something to understand. In those traditions, the lack of fixed meaning wasn't a problem to solve. It was a truth to accept. But in the Western world, things unfolded differently. The idea of a deep, central meaning, one handed down by gods or found through logic, became a kind of anchor. People sought certainty, order, and purpose. And for a long time, that anchor held. For centuries, meaning was tied to something bigger than any one person. It came from religion, from divine order, from sacred texts and promises of eternity. Life was hard, but it made sense because there was a reason behind it. There was a structure, a goal, a direction. But that structure began to shift. Slowly at first, like a creaking floorboard. Then all at once, like a roof giving way. Science began to explain what once belonged to myth. Telescopes showed us a vast, indifferent cosmos. Microscopes revealed a world of chance and pattern, not miracles. Old stories didn't seem to fit the world people were discovering. And with that unraveling came a new question. Sharper now, but still familiar. If these stories aren't true, then what is? In the 19th century, this feeling started to find its name. Philosophers began to speak it aloud, not with joy, not always with dread, but with clarity. They gave shape to the whisper, nihilism, the idea that if we remove those old meanings, religion, tradition, certainty, what's left might be nothing at all. Not because life becomes worse, not because humans become cruel, but because without something higher to answer to, everything we believe becomes optional. And for many, that was terrifying. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most well-known voices on nihilism, saw what was happening. He didn't celebrate the loss of meaning, but he didn't shy away from it either. He warned that the old foundations were crumbling and that people might not be ready for what came next. He spoke of the death of God, not as a literal event, but as a cultural shift, a breaking of belief that once held everything together. And he asked, what will we do with this emptiness? For Nietzsche, the danger of nihilism wasn't in the nothing. It was in how people might react to it. Some might retreat into old comforts, even if they no longer believed. Others might fall into despair or apathy, but a few, he hoped, might find a new way forward, one not based on borrowed meaning, but meaning they created for themselves, a kind of brave honesty, a way of living fully even in the face of the void. His ideas were sharp, yes, but they were also rooted in something tender, the belief that we are capable of facing life without illusions, that we can look into the emptiness and not fall, but walk, not because there is a path waiting, but because we choose to take steps. Today, the word nihilism still stirs unease. It's often misunderstood, painted as darkness, as danger. But if you look at its roots, not just in philosophy, but in the quiet hearts of people across time, you find something else. You find a kind of honesty, a willingness to look at the world not as we wish it to be, but as it is, a mirror, not a mask. And though that mirror may show us a world without promised meaning, it also shows us ourselves, standing in it, breathing, thinking, choosing. That's not nothing. That's a beginning, a place to pause, and maybe one day, a place to build. For now, you can rest here, with the thought that this feeling, this wondering, is older than you, older than words, and you are not alone in it. You never were. Others have stood here too under the same quiet sky, asking the same unspoken questions. And among them, one voice echoes louder than most, not because it shouted, but because it spoke clearly in a time when clarity was rare. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher who walked among the crumbling ruins of old beliefs and dared to name what others only felt. He didn't invent nihilism, but he saw it coming like a slow storm on the horizon, and he gave it form before many knew what it was. He looked around at the world, the faiths fading, the traditions hollowing out, the structures people leaned on cracking at the edges, and he said, God is dead. But this was not a celebration. It was a warning. When Nietzsche said those words, God is dead, he wasn't speaking about a literal death. He meant that the shared belief in something greater, something absolute, something eternal, had disappeared, that the foundation so many people stood on had quietly dissolved. And now, here we were, standing on air. In the past, people believed the world made sense because God was at the center of it. Right and wrong came from above. Purpose was given, not chosen. But Nietzsche saw that this was no longer true for many. Science was rising. Doubt was spreading. The old answers were slipping through our fingers, and in that space, where certainty used to be, there was now a question. A terrifying, liberating, honest question. If God is gone, what comes next? Nietzsche didn't think this death would leave peace behind. He thought it would leave a vacuum, a space where anything could rush in. He feared that people would cling to new illusions, create false gods, or lose themselves in distraction. He knew how deeply humans crave meaning, and without an old source to draw from, that hunger might drive us toward danger or despair. But Nietzsche wasn't a pessimist, not truly. Beneath his fierce words and strange parables was something tender. He believed we could rise from the ruins, that we could face the emptiness, not with fear, but with courage, that we could become more than what we were. He called this the path of the Übermensch, not a Superman like the cartoons, but a person who creates their own values, who doesn't run from the void, but walks into it and builds something honest, not because it's easy, but because it's real. Nietzsche believed that without divine meaning, we're left with freedom. And freedom, though frightening, is a gift. If nothing is assigned to us, then everything's open. We don't have to follow. We can choose. We can shape. We can become. But he also knew this wouldn't happen quickly, that there would be confusion, that people might pretend they still believed even when they didn't, that some might fall into despair. He called this time the shadow of God, the moment after the belief is gone, but before something new has grown, a time of waiting, of drifting, of searching in the dark. And maybe, in a way, that's where we are now, not lost, but still turning, still listening to the echo of something we used to trust, still learning how to walk without a path. Nietzsche never offered easy answers. He asked hard questions. And yet, he believed in our strength. He believed that humans could carry the weight of existence, not because we're told to, but because we choose to, because we are capable of standing in the middle of the void and not crumbling, but breathing, looking around, and beginning. Maybe that's where you are now, in the shadow of something that once felt sure. Maybe an old belief has softened, or a sense of purpose has slipped away. Maybe you're feeling that quiet space where certainty used to live. And that's okay. It means you're awake. It means you're seeing the world not just as it was handed to you, but as it really is. And that can be the start of something beautiful, not because it's clear, but because it's yours. Nietzsche didn't give people comfort. He gave them challenge. But within that challenge was a deep, almost hidden kind of hope. The kind that says, you don't need a map. You can make your own ground. And maybe, in the silence where meaning once lived, you can hear your own voice more clearly. Not the voice of the world, not the echo of the past, just you, choosing. So here you are. Not where you began, but not quite anywhere new either, standing, maybe, in the space between old meaning and something not yet formed. It's not a place with clear rules or signs. It's more like the edge of a forest just before nightfall. You can't see the path, but you feel that something important lives out there, somewhere in the dark. After Nietzsche's warning and invitation, a new group of thinkers appeared, men and women who didn't turn away from the emptiness, but walked directly into it. They didn't all agree on everything, but they shared something deep, a belief that life must be faced honestly, even when it feels uncertain. We call them existentialists, and they didn't come to hand out answers. They came to ask better questions. Existentialism isn't a system. It's not a tidy philosophy that fits on a poster. It's more like a mood, a way of sitting with the fact that we are here, without clear instruction, without guarantees, without someone else telling us what the point is. It says, this is your life. You are the one who wakes up inside it, and no one else can live it for you. One of the clearest voices in this space was Jean-Paul Sartre. He believed that existence comes first, that we are born, we find ourselves conscious, and only after that do we start to define who we are. He called this existence before essence. It means we don't arrive with a preset purpose, we create it as we go. That can be terrifying, but it can also be freeing. You're not stuck in a role. You're not locked into a meaning someone else wrote. You get to decide. You get to become. Of course, Sartre also warned that this freedom is a kind of weight. He called it anguish, not a dramatic theatrical pain, but a quiet awareness of how much responsibility we have. If no one else is writing the script, then what we choose matters deeply. Every choice is a kind of authorship, and that's no small thing. Another thinker, Simone de Beauvoir, explored what this meant in daily life. She spoke of how easily we fall into routines, roles, stories we didn't choose, and how important it is to wake up inside those stories and ask, is this mine? Is this how I want to live? Not to judge, not to shame, but to remember that you are not just a reader of your life, you are the writer too. The existentialists didn't try to make the void disappear. They didn't pretend the universe would give us meaning, but they didn't see that as a reason to give up. They saw it as a reason to act. If nothing is promised, then what we do becomes even more important. Our small choices, what we love, what we protect, what we build, are how we speak back to the silence. Albert Camus, another voice in this chorus, put it differently. He described life as absurd, not because it's pointless, but because we keep searching for meaning in a universe that stays quiet. He compared us to Sisyphus, the old myth, pushing a rock uphill forever, only for it to roll back down. But Camus didn't think this meant life was bleak. He said we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the rock becomes lighter, but because he accepts the task. He finds meaning in the doing, in being alive, in being free, in choosing to push the rock even when it doesn't explain itself. And maybe that's what existentialism really offers. Not comfort, not answers, but a kind of honesty, a kind of courage, a way to live not because someone told you to, but because you decided that life, even without a map, is still worth showing up for. There is beauty in that, a quiet defiance, not a scream into the dark, but a steady breath, a candle lit, not because it lights the whole room, but because it lights this moment, your moment. So if you're feeling like you're still on the edge, like you haven't stepped into meaning but can't go back to borrowed purpose, that's okay. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're simply where many have been before you, right on the edge of something real. And you don't have to leap. You just have to stay here a little while longer. Look around. Breathe. Begin to ask not what meaning has been given to you, but what meaning you're ready to give. There's a moment after the fear of freedom is settled where a new kind of question begins to rise. If life has no fixed meaning, no higher plan, and no answers waiting in the stars, then why not give up? Why push forward? Why keep walking if the path leads nowhere in particular? These aren't hopeless questions. They're honest ones. And few people ask them more deeply or more calmly than Albert Camus. Camus wasn't looking to be anyone's hero. He didn't build systems or preach solutions. He wrote like someone watching the world from a quiet window, observing not just the facts of life, but the feelings that come with them. He believed the human condition was defined by a strange tension. On one side, the universe, silent, indifferent, cold. On the other, us, desperate for meaning, structure, answers. When these two forces meet, he said, we feel the absurd. Not absurd like ridiculous, but absurd like a song played in the wrong key. A mismatch, a clash. The world doesn't explain itself, and we can't stop asking it to. That's the absurd. It's what happens when the need for meaning meets a world that gives us none. Camus believed this realization could break a person, or it could wake them up, because when you see the absurd for what it is, you're faced with a choice. You can deny it, you can escape it, or you can accept it. You can live with it. You can even gently, quietly smile at it. That smile is not a joke. It's a rebellion, not the loud kind, not the violent kind, but the personal kind, the kind where you say, yes, this world is indifferent. Yes, I have no guarantees, but I will live anyway. Camus wrote of this in his story of Sisyphus. In ancient myth, Sisyphus was condemned to push a heavy rock up a hill only to have it roll back down every time he reached the top. Over and over, forever. To most, that would sound like torture, a life of effort with no reward, a task with no finish. But Camus saw something else. He imagined Sisyphus aware of the absurdity, aware that his work would never end, and yet he keeps pushing. He chooses to push. And in that choice, Camus finds something powerful. If the struggle is all there is, then choosing the struggle becomes a kind of freedom, a kind of victory. Camus wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the task got easier, not because the rock changed, but because he changed. He stopped waiting for the universe to make it worthwhile. He made it worthwhile himself." This wasn't a trick. It wasn't denial. It was acceptance. And through that acceptance came something strange, a calm joy. Not joy like celebration, but joy like presence, like peace, like the quiet knowledge that you don't need to win or finish or prove anything. You just need to live. Camus called this revolt. Not fighting against life, but refusing to let life's lack of meaning take yours away. He believed that awareness, clarity, and persistence were forms of quiet resistance. To wake up every morning knowing that life offers no final prize and still choosing to live it fully, that was courage. That was strength. And for Camus, that was enough. In this way, the absurd doesn't have to crush us. It can clarify us. It strips away illusion, but leaves room for truth. It removes the promise of eternal meaning, but in doing so, makes room for honest meaning, chosen meaning, lived meaning. Think of it like this. If the stars are silent, then your voice matters more. If nothing is written for you, then what you write becomes sacred. If the universe offers no comfort, then your kindness, your laughter, your love, these things shine brighter, not because they're eternal, but because they're real. Here, now Camus never said it would be easy, but he did believe it could be beautiful. Not because life made sense, but because we live it anyway. We feel, we try, we fall, and we rise. We share the road. And even if the road leads nowhere in particular, there's something in the walking that makes it ours. So if the world feels silent to you now, if meaning seems out of reach, you don't need to fix it. You don't need to solve it. You can simply notice it, sit with it, and like Sisyphus, gently place your hands on the rock and smile. The stars don't blink for us. They don't celebrate birthdays, mourn losses, or pause when a heart breaks. Galaxies collide in silence. Solar systems die without announcement. Somewhere, a sun swells into a red giant. Somewhere else, a black hole swallows the last whisper of a star. And in all of that vastness, you, sitting quietly, breathing slowly, exist. A blip, a speck. A fleeting pattern of atoms held together by gravity and chance. For some, this truth feels crushing, a kind of smallness that wraps itself around the chest. The universe, in its scale and silence, can feel like a kind of indifference, not cruel, just unaware. It does not care what time you woke up this morning or whether you made it out of bed at all. And yet, you're the one noticing. You're the one who looks out into all that dark expanse and recognizes the sheer weight of it. The cold beauty of a cosmos that neither judges nor forgives, that just is. You're the one who feels the ache of your own impermanence and still wonders why. The stars don't reflect. They don't tell stories. But you do. You, with your fragile body and flickering thoughts, are the one weaving meaning where none was given. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." That's not poetry, that's physics. You are made of stardust, literally. Hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, all forged in ancient stars and scattered across space by explosions so violent, so beautiful, they restructured galaxies. You are not outside the universe. You are the universe, briefly arranged to look and feel and ask. The cosmic indifference isn't personal. It's impartial. It doesn't punish or reward. It simply is. And in that stillness, that grand silence, there is something freeing. If the universe has no inherent meaning, then we are not bound by any script. We are not late. We are not wrong. We are not waiting for permission to matter. We simply can. That's not despair. That's potential. If the stars don't care, then the care is ours to give. We get to choose what matters. To whisper love into the void. To hold someone's hand even though all hands fade. To laugh when nothing's funny just because joy still bubbles up in our odd little hearts. That's your act of quiet rebellion. You choose to matter to someone. You choose to feel. You water a plant that doesn't thank you. You sing to no audience. You tell a story to someone who won't remember. You give even when the universe doesn't ask. That is not weakness. That's your strength. The stars don't cry, but you do. And that might mean more than all their light. Because you're not just noticing the darkness. You're responding to it. You're saying, even so, I'm here. Even so, I'll try. And that trying, that absurd, gentle, ongoing trying, that's what separates you from dust. That's what gives shape to a shapeless world. It's not about grand gestures. It's about breathing when you don't have to, loving when it's hard, waking up again to face another day in a universe that will never clap for you. You are the applause. You are the witness. You are the echo of ancient stars given voice. So no, the universe doesn't care, but that doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything is open. It means we can make meaning with every heartbeat, every glance, every decision to stay when it would be easier to leave. It means the candle flickers, but it burns. And that flame, however brief, lights a path no one else could walk but you. Let it mean something. Let it mean whatever you need it to mean. Because in the vastness of all that silence, you get to speak. You get to say, I was here. And somehow, impossibly, that's enough. And yet, in all that cosmic silence, you still care. Isn't that strange? That knowing the stars won't answer doesn't stop you from gazing up anyway. That even in a universe where nothing is written for you, you still find stories in constellations. That despite no celestial audience, you still catch your breath at sunsets, feel your chest tighten at music, turn pages in books where every line was penned by someone else, grasping at the same unspeakable thing. You're aware, maybe painfully so, that life doesn't hand out meaning like a prize, and yet you persist in looking for it. That persistence isn't a flaw. It's not weakness. It's the most human thing about you. A spark, a flicker, a refusal. You are a match lit in the wind, trembling, wavering, and still burning anyway. Maybe nihilism isn't the end of caring. Maybe it's the backdrop against which care becomes even more real. When you let go of the idea that life must offer something in return, that there's a scoreboard or a divine ledger or a grand finale waiting to justify the mess, what you're left with is something quieter, smaller, stranger, you, just you, choosing to keep showing up, caring anyway, acting anyway, loving anyway. You become like a tree growing on the edge of a cliff. No one planted you, no one promised you fruit or safety or applause. But still, your roots dig in. Still, your branches stretch toward the sun, even if no one sees them. That choice, to keep stretching. That's where something remarkable lives. People often hear the word nihilism and assume it means despair, as if the absence of meaning must mean the absence of joy. But what if it's not despair but space? What if the collapse of the old illusions that there's a script, that things are fair, that pain must be purposeful, clears a kind of stillness in which something unexpected can grow? When nothing is assigned to you, you become free to assign it yourself, not because it's written in the stars, but because it matters to you. It's a different kind of sacred, not handed down, but handcrafted, not universal, but undeniable. That aching song you wrote in the dark, that meal you cooked for someone just to see them smile, that long walk you took for no reason at all except to feel your feet against the earth. That's not meaning in the grand cosmic sense. It's not approved by the heavens or certified by gods. But it is meaning. It's your meaning, yours to shape, to carry, to protect, like a fragile bird cupped in your hands. And maybe the universe doesn't care if it flies, but you do, and that's enough. The stars keep collapsing, the galaxies keep spinning, but down here on this fragile, trembling world, someone still lights a candle when the power goes out. Someone still sings lullabies to a crying child. Someone still whispers, "It's okay, I'm here," even when they're scared too. The absurdity of life doesn't erase the tenderness within it. If anything, it makes it more precious. Because it's not guaranteed, because it wasn't promised, because it bloomed anyway. So no, the stars don't blink for us. But sometimes we blink at them. And in that silent exchange, in that flicker of awareness between the infinite and the individual, maybe that's where we find something not written into the laws of physics, not dictated by destiny, but chosen, willed, felt, real. But even that quiet act of choosing, of willing, of feeling, can begin to tremble under pressure. There are days when it's easy to believe in small personal meanings, to gather them like smooth stones in your pocket. But there are also days when they slip through your fingers, when you wake up and the air feels heavier for no reason, when everything you do seems to echo back with silence, no applause, no signs, just the hollow sound of your own footsteps. That's when nihilism doesn't just whisper, it settles in like fog. It makes the world feel a little more distant. The objects on your shelf lose their stories. Music becomes background noise instead of invitation. The sky, once full of metaphors, just becomes weather. And on those days, it's easy to think, maybe none of this matters. Maybe I'm not supposed to care. Maybe caring is just another trick we play on ourselves to fill up space between birth and death. But here's something rarely said aloud. It's okay to feel this way, not just once, not just occasionally, but often, repeatedly, cyclically. The human mind isn't built for consistent clarity. We fluctuate like tides, like seasons. You don't need to climb out of that fog immediately. You don't need to wrestle your way back to certainty. Some truths aren't wrestled with. They're sat beside. And maybe that's where healing happens. Not in solving the riddle of life, but in quietly admitting you don't have to. The mistake is believing that nihilism ends in despair. But really, that's only one of its faces. The other face is gentler, quieter, and often overlooked. Because if nothing has inherent meaning, that also means nothing is disqualified from meaning. You're free to choose, not forced to, not demanded to, but free. And with freedom comes a kind of tenderness. If the universe doesn't care whether you get out of bed today or not, then getting out of bed becomes an act of quiet defiance. Making tea, calling a friend, folding your laundry, all become tiny rebellions against the void. Not because they change the cosmos, but because they are yours. And in a meaningless universe, that might be the most beautiful kind of meaning, one that's not handed down but handcrafted. Like writing a poem in the sand, knowing the tide will wash it away. The poem still matters. Maybe it matters more. Maybe the awareness of its impermanence gives it weight, like a breath held just before it's exhaled. And when we share that breath, when we say to someone else, "Yeah, me too. I felt that emptiness too," we stitch a tiny thread between two drifting islands. We don't conquer the void, but we make a bridge across it, temporary, fragile, but real. That's something the darker corners of nihilism can't erase. Connection, even brief, even flickering. It's a flicker of light that doesn't pretend to be a lighthouse, but it's enough to keep going, enough to walk one more step, make one more choice, say one more word. So if the fog hasn't lifted, don't rush it. Sit with it. Let it be what it is. You don't have to name it. You don't have to fix it. Just breathe in it. Be inside it. And when the moment comes, and it always does, when something stirs, something soft and unassuming, a thought, a song, a memory, follow it. Not because it's a map, but because it's real. Real things don't always have to explain themselves. They just are. And maybe that's the quiet power we all hold, not to defeat the meaninglessness, but to live honestly inside it, fully, softly, together. And that together isn't some grand promise of permanent companionship or unshakable understanding. It's much smaller than that, much more delicate. It's the silent companionship of strangers who happen to be awake at the same late hour. It's the comfort in a glance, the echo of someone else's laugh, the half-remembered feeling of a touch that meant safety. In a world where nothing may matter on a cosmic scale, these moments, brief, flickering, tender, can be everything. Not because they solve the puzzle, but because they remind us we're not alone while sitting with it. When you walk down a quiet street at night and hear footsteps ahead of you or see a distant window still glowing, there's something in that, a kind of wordless assurance that someone else is here too. Someone else made it through the same invisible hours. That fragile sense of shared existence, of being part of something even when nothing is defined, is a kind of meaning all its own. And no, it doesn't fill the void. It doesn't tie everything up neatly. But maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe the beauty lies in its lack of obligation. It asks for nothing. It simply shows up and exists, like you do, like I do. And if there's a kind of purpose to be found in all this, maybe it's not in the stars, or the theories, or the stories we tell ourselves to quiet the dark. Maybe it's in the way we hold space for each other to not have it figured out. In the way we offer kindness, not because we expect it to echo through the cosmos, but because someone else is here and hurting too. It's not about answers. It's about witnessing, about being present, even when everything feels suspended in uncertainty. Especially then, because that's when presence becomes something sacred. You see, when meaning disappears from the horizon, what we're left with is what's closest. Breath, touch, warmth, a voice, a moment of silence that doesn't ask for anything but your attention. And in this closeness, in this narrowing of the lens, the noise quiets. The pressure to explain lifts. There's just this moment, this room, this breath. You don't have to reach out to the edges of the universe. You can just Be here. Let your chest rise. Let it fall. Feel your hands resting where they are. Notice the weight of your body and the stillness around you. That is real. That is enough. It always was. The idea that we need to chase some higher truth, some golden meaning that wraps everything in a bow. That idea might be the very thing that blinds us to what's already here. The simplicity of existence, the softness of awareness, the quiet miracle of being a thinking, breathing thing in the middle of all this strangeness. There's humility in accepting that maybe we're not the climax of some epic cosmic tale. Maybe we're just one brief spark in an endless dark. But we're aware of it, and we feel, and we connect, and we imagine, and we care. And in that caring, in that deeply human act of turning toward life, toward each other, we build our own kind of light. Not to conquer the dark, but to warm our corner of it, so when the big questions arrive and the silence answers back, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to rush to fill the void. You can sit quietly beside it. You can breathe. You can feel. And you can choose, even without certainty, to move forward. Not because you found the answer, but because this moment is asking for your attention. And sometimes the greatest act of resistance against the absurd is simply to stay open, to let life in even when it confuses you, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. That is meaning enough. And maybe that's what we've been circling this whole time. Not a grand solution, not an answer wrapped in certainty, but the quiet bravery of simply continuing. There's something gentle about that thought, something soft and deeply human, that in the face of all this uncertainty, the galaxies spinning indifferently, the indifferent silence of the universe, we can still choose to open our eyes in the morning. We can still reach for a glass of water, still pause to watch a breeze catch the curtain, still laugh, still cry, still make a cup of tea, and carry on. No one gives us permission to do this. We just do. And that alone carries a strange, humble kind of power. Because for all the cosmic indifference we're surrounded by, we are still capable of tenderness. We still hold each other through grief. Still write poems we don't expect anyone to read. Still plant gardens in lands we know will someday become dust. The absurdity is not that life has no meaning. It's that we keep living it as though it might. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's the only sane response. The universe will not clap for us, will not applaud our efforts, will not declare any path more sacred than another. But here we are, walking paths anyway, listening to stories anyway, listening now maybe to this story, your story. And if you're still with me, still resting here with these words in your ears, maybe something in you recognizes this, that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a moment to be felt. It doesn't need to be justified or earned. It can just be, like breath, like a shadow, like music you don't understand but let wash over you anyway. And in that kind of surrender, there is peace, not resignation, not despair, but an acceptance so gentle it almost feels like forgiveness. Forgiveness for being lost, for not having it all figured out, for still searching. Sometimes we think meaning must arrive like a thunderclap, an awakening, a revelation, some dramatic cosmic signal. But what if it's quieter than that? What if it arrives in moments so small we almost miss them? A glance across a room, the smell of warm bread, the ache of missing someone, the relief of solitude? These are not answers, but they are real. They are alive. They ask for nothing and give everything. And maybe that's what living honestly within the void looks like, not denying it, not filling it with noise, but letting it soften you, letting it make you more aware of time, of breath, of other people and their quiet struggles. Nihilism tells us that life has no inherent meaning, but maybe the mistake is thinking that makes it empty. Maybe it makes it spacious, roomy, a canvas with no instructions, no fixed expectations. Maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe that's something to hold with reverence, because in that openness, in that wide, quiet space, something ancient and vulnerable wakes up. Something curious, something kind. We notice that even without a grand narrative, we are still capable of compassion, of beauty, of awe, not because the universe demands it of us, but because we want to give it. We want to witness and participate, not for reward, not for purpose, but because we are here, because this moment is happening, because we get to be conscious within it, and that in itself is extraordinary. It's okay if you don't believe anything right now. It's okay if you're drifting, untethered, uncertain. You're allowed to be unsure. The story keeps unfolding whether or not you know what it means, and your part in it, however small it feels, is still yours to shape. Not forever, not perfectly, but for now, and now is enough. If the universe is indifferent, then every act of care you offer it, every smile, every kindness, every moment of quiet courage is a rebellion, a small silent declaration that says, I was here, I saw, I felt, I chose to stay awake. That's not meaning imposed from the outside, that's meaning you made. And it may not last forever, but right now, it's real. And if that's real, if meaning can live in a single moment, in a gesture, in the way someone chooses to stay awake inside all of this, then maybe we've misunderstood what strength really looks like. Because it's not always bold, it's not always loud. Sometimes, strength is choosing to feel when numbness would be easier. Sometimes, it's noticing the quiet sadness behind someone's smile and not turning away. Sometimes, it's letting yourself cry for no grand reason, just because the day was heavy, and you're still learning how to carry it. That is not weakness. That is not failure. That is what it means to be fully alive. And when you look around, really look, you start to see that everyone is carrying something they don't know how to name. Everyone is trying, failing, trying again. Behind all the curated lives and confident answers, there's a deeper current. Doubt, fear, tenderness. We're all trying to make it through the same silence. We just carry it differently. And once you realize that, the world shifts. The person who cut you off in traffic becomes someone else overwhelmed. The friend who didn't text back becomes someone lost in their own fog. The stranger on the street becomes someone with a storm you'll never see. That shift is not about excusing harm, but about softening your posture toward others and yourself. It doesn't require that you become a saint. It just asks that you pay attention, that you remember that consciousness, this strange flicker of awareness we're all born into, is not easy to hold. And yet, here we are, holding it, together, barely, beautifully. Maybe the point was never to transcend suffering, never to outthink the void or silence it completely, but to hold each other inside it. Maybe meaning isn't found beyond the silence, but inside the hands that reach across it. And maybe that's what we've been doing all along, reaching through stories, through glances, through songs that make no sense on paper but move us anyway, reaching through late-night thoughts and long walks and words whispered into the dark, hoping someone else feels it too. Because even if we never find certainty, we can find each other. And sometimes that's enough. Not as a solution, not as a fix, but as a presence, someone else who sees the same absurdity and keeps walking anyway. That walking becomes its own quiet ritual, one foot in front of the other, not toward salvation, not toward glory, just toward tomorrow, and then the next tomorrow. And maybe that's what life is, not a line, not a ladder, not a race, but a rhythm, an unfolding, a slow dance with no choreography. You just keep moving, and the movement becomes its own kind of poetry. You don't need to be great. You don't need to be right. You just need to be honest. To feel what you feel without apology. To let go of the myth that you're supposed to be further along, more certain, more fixed. There is no fixed. There is no final form. Just this version of you here, now, listening, breathing. And that's enough. Even in the silence. Especially in the silence. If you can feel your way through it, not with logic, but with presence, then you're already doing something incredible. You're building a quiet kind of meaning, one that doesn't try to conquer life, but chooses to stand inside it with open hands. And maybe, in the end, that's what all this has been pointing toward, not a perfect philosophy, not a neat answer, just an invitation to feel, to stay, to witness, and to walk together, even if we never arrive anywhere. Because maybe arrival was never the point. Maybe the idea that there's a destination, a place where everything finally makes sense, where all the pieces click into place, where you become the ideal version of yourself, was always a kind of illusion. A story we tell ourselves to make the chaos feel like it's leading somewhere, but life doesn't unfold like a novel. There is no climax waiting at the end of a carefully crafted arc. There's just more life, more breath, more mornings where you wake up and wonder how you got here, and more nights where you lie still and feel the silence settling in like snow. The road doesn't straighten. The clouds don't part with finality. You keep walking, not toward an ending, but through ever-changing scenery, with nothing guaranteed but the next step. And perhaps that's the quiet liberation buried beneath all the weight. You don't need to become anything. You don't need to win your way into worth. You're not a puzzle to be solved or a draft to be revised. You are already the story, messy, fragmented, beautiful in the way only something fleeting can be. And in the absence of cosmic instruction or divine narrative, you get to choose how you show up in each moment, not because the universe demands it, not because there's a scoreboard keeping track, but because you're here, alive, moving, breathing, and maybe that's enough. Maybe enough doesn't mean complete or triumphant. Maybe it just means honest, present, awake in the moment, even if the moment is uncertain, especially then. It's strange, isn't it? How often we chase meaning like a finish line, always just out of reach, always promising that if we run a little harder, strive a little more, we'll finally cross into something more real. But meaning doesn't wait at the end. It happens along the way, in quiet gestures, in the curve of a smile, in a shared silence, in the hand you hold even when the path makes no sense. Meaning doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It hums, soft and steady, in the cracks of ordinary days, in laughter that escapes despite sorrow, in meals shared in worn kitchens, in the way the light hits your wall in the late afternoon. These moments don't fix anything. They don't erase the void or solve the mystery, but they shimmer briefly like stars across an indifferent sky. And for a second, you feel anchored, not because you found the answer, but because you remembered the question doesn't have to be solved. It can be lived, like music, like wind, like this strange, unfinished life. We don't need a grand revelation to make the days worthwhile. We just need the courage to inhabit them, even when they feel hollow. To carry ourselves gently, even when the world doesn't offer comfort. To keep walking, not because we know where we're going, but because we're already in motion, and stopping has never really been the point. And when we forget, and we will forget, there will still be time, not to catch up, but to return, to pause, to breathe, to begin again, not because a new chapter promises clarity, but because the act of turning the page is, in itself, a quiet resistance to despair. No arrival, no destination, just presence, just the next breath, just the soft insistence that being here even now matters, not in a grand world-altering way, but in the way that the moon still rises, even when no one looks, in the way that broken things still reflect light, in the way that your presence, small and trembling as it may feel, still shifts the air around it. Maybe we'll never know why we're here. Maybe there is no why, but still, we are. And in that stubborn, inexplicable fact, maybe there's enough space to build something tender, not answers, but warmth, not certainty, but connection, not peace that lasts forever, but a peace that visits now and then like a stray cat on a windowsill, reminding you that even if the universe doesn't speak your language, it still holds you gently, without promise, without pressure, just here. And being here doesn't require that you understand why. It doesn't ask you to justify your presence with productivity or purpose or progress. It simply asks that you notice. Notice that you're breathing, that your heart is still beating even without being told to, that your thoughts come and go like weather patterns, strange and unplanned, rising and dissolving, all on their own. Notice that the world hasn't stopped spinning, even if you feel still, that the sun, distant and indifferent, continues to rise and fall, casting light and shadow on everything without asking if it's deserved. Maybe that's the grace we keep overlooking, the grace of things continuing, not for us, but with us, not to make sense of life, but to live inside it anyway. And in that living, we begin to understand something subtle but transformative, that the value of a moment is not measured by what it produces, but by how it holds you. A moment of silence is not empty. A moment of stillness is not wasted. Even the moments when you feel like nothing are happening, something is. Your breath, your body, your attention, simply existing. You're not behind. You're not late. You're just here. And here is always enough place to begin again. There's a softness in letting go of the chase, in dropping the idea that your worth lies somewhere up ahead, just past the next accomplishment, the next realization, the next version of you. Because no matter how much we change or how far we think we've come, we're always just returning to breath, to awareness, to the simple, almost laughable truth that we are alive and we don't know why. And yet, here we are. And so we eat breakfast, and so we hold doors open, and so we speak softly to ourselves when no one else is listening. These tiny things, these unnoticed rituals, they don't build monuments or shake the heavens, but they create a rhythm that says, even in the absence of grand meaning, life can be beautiful. Maybe not always, maybe not easily, but still, and maybe that's enough. Enough to keep you here when it's tempting to disappear. Enough to remind you that being confused doesn't mean you're doing life wrong. It just means you're paying attention. And yes, sometimes that attention hurts. Sometimes it reveals how strange and unfair and unsolvable this all is. But other times, it reveals the way light pools in a puddle after rain, the way a stranger's laugh echoes into your chest and makes you laugh too, the way you look at someone you love and remember for just a second that love doesn't need an explanation. It just is. And if that can exist here in this unplanned, ungoverned world, then maybe nothing is as empty as it seems. The absence of meaning doesn't mean the absence of worth. It just means there's no scoreboard, no judge, no final grade, just your experience, raw and immediate. Just the weight of your feet on the floor, the sound of your breath in the quiet, the way your body knows how to continue even when your mind is full of fog. And maybe that's enough to keep going, not with certainty, not with confidence, but with softness. A softness that says, even now, I choose to stay. Not because everything makes sense, not because everything is healed, but because this moment is still unfolding and you're still inside it, still watching, still listening, still open, even if it hurts, even if it doesn't lead anywhere. And maybe that openness, that willingness to live without a clear reason is the deepest kind of strength there is. The kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't seek applause, the kind that simply says, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And maybe that's the most anyone can ever say and truly mean. I'm here, not pretending to be fearless, not pretending to be enlightened, not performing joy or hiding pain, just here, aware, breathing, awake to the strange fact that this life, with all its weight and confusion, is still happening around you, through you, whether or not you understand it. And that presence alone, unpolished and vulnerable, is already an act of courage, because staying present means letting the hard moments land. It means feeling the dull ache that sits under your ribs when you're unsure, the sting of nostalgia when a memory surprises you, the weight of uncertainty when the future blurs into static. It means allowing those feelings to pass through you without demanding they explain themselves. That's not weakness. That's honesty. And honesty, in a world constantly trying to distract you, is one of the rarest, rawest forms of strength. You don't need to be brilliant to be here. You don't need to have a plan. You don't need to name your pain to make it real. You just need to stay with yourself long enough to notice what's true, what's rising in you right now, whether it's love or anger or fear or peace. You don't need to control it. You don't need to fix it. You just need to meet it. Meet yourself as you are, not as you think you should be. And that simple act of staying, of not abandoning yourself, is the beginning of something real, something gentle, something that can carry you through the fog when no other path is clear. We're so used to measuring ourselves by what we produce, by how well we keep up, by how coherent our story sounds when we say it out loud. But life was never asking for a story that made sense. It was asking for your presence, for your attention, for your willingness to stay awake while the world spins without permission. And when you stop trying to narrate your life into meaning, when you stop trying to arrange your pain into something poetic, you may find that just feeling it is enough. Just letting it be there without running from it, without dressing it up in metaphors. The grief, the wonder, the boredom, the love, the doubt, all of it alive in you, all of it valid, none of it wasted, even the parts that feel messy, especially those, because messiness is a sign that you're not disengaged. It's proof that you care, even when you're not sure what to do with that care. And if care can exist inside of meaninglessness, maybe that's what gives it shape. not answers, but empathy. Not control, but connection. When you realize that, you may begin to look at others differently too. Not as characters in your story, not as obstacles or reflections, but as fellow travelers in the same beautiful absurd. You may start to see the pain in their silence, the effort in their laughter, the questions behind their certainty. And instead of trying to fix them, you may just sit with them. Say nothing. Offer the only thing that matters in that moment. I'm here with you in this, not above it, not past it, with you. And the same words come back to you when you most need them, not from the sky, not from philosophy, but from within. I'm here, still, even now, even in this. And there's peace in that. A peace that doesn't erase confusion, but makes space for it. A peace that doesn't demand happiness, but allows for honesty. And when life asks nothing of you, when no one is watching, when the sky is still and the air is heavy, you will hear it again. The quiet, steady truth that somehow, despite everything, you are here. And maybe that's the only truth you ever needed. And maybe that's why you've never stopped searching. Not for answers exactly, but for something that feels like a mirror. Something that doesn't fix the silence, but reflects it back to you gently, so you know you're not the only one staring into it. That's what these moments become, reflections, not solutions, not instructions, just echoes of being. And in that, maybe you begin to forgive yourself, not for being imperfect, but for ever thinking you had to be anything else. The world never asked you to be flawless. It never demanded that you discover a grand truth or find the secret lever behind existence. It simply held space for you, quietly, patiently, as stars burned and cooled in the distance, as galaxies spun in slow, silent spirals. You were here, breathing, feeling, wondering, a soft anomaly in a hard-edged cosmos. And for once, maybe that's enough. You are enough. See, we often confuse the absence of meaning with the presence of failure, as though if the universe doesn't speak, it must be disappointed in us. But silence isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just spaciousness, an open field untouched, waiting not for purpose, but for presence. Maybe nihilism isn't a locked door. It's a wide open plain. No fences, no signs, no map. That can be terrifying, but it can also be freeing. Because if nothing is predetermined, then everything is possible. If meaning isn't handed down from the sky, then we get to build it. Small, personal, real. You might not change the world, but you can change how you live in it. That's no small thing. And yet there's a paradox here. Because even when we accept the absence of objective meaning, we still ache for something to hold, for significance, connection, belonging. That ache doesn't go away just because you understand the math of the stars or the thermodynamics of entropy. That ache is human, and so you carry both truths at once. The cold fact that the universe doesn't revolve around you, and the warm truth that someone once held your hand like it did. That contradiction is not a mistake. It's the texture of being alive. The mind may whisper, none of this matters. And yet the heart still tugs when someone leaves, still softens when someone stays. You can believe in meaninglessness and still cry during a quiet song. Still smile at a sunrise. Still mourn a lost cat like the world stopped spinning. This isn't hypocrisy. This is humanity. To live fully in a meaningless universe is not to flatten yourself into numbness. It's to feel it all and choose anyway. Choose to care. Choose to stay. Choose to create rituals even when you know they're arbitrary. Light the candle. Bake the cake. Say, I love you, even if those words are just sound shaped by breath and biology. Because what else is there but what we make together? What else is there but this strange, beautiful rebellion to love, knowing it's temporary, to try, knowing we'll fail, to speak, knowing silence is bigger, and still, to mean it. We often imagine nihilism as a dead end, a cul-de-sac in thought where hope dries up and everything becomes gray. But maybe it's not a wall, maybe it's a window, one that shows you how fragile everything is and how miraculous it is that anything exists at all, that you exist at all, right now, listening, breathing, that your life, this exact flicker in time, happens to intersect with mine, here, through this voice, through this moment. What are the odds? And what if we honored that chance, not with despair, but with attention? What if nihilism didn't kill meaning, but liberated it, made it something we're no longer obligated to chase, but invited to make? You don't need to be certain. You don't need to be profound. You just need to be here, to witness this moment, to feel the warmth of your body and the cool breath of night against your skin, to hear the small sounds around you, the quiet hum of life continuing. Even in a universe that doesn't speak, life speaks. In gestures, in laughter, in pain, in the gentle way someone hands you a cup of tea when you didn't even ask. That's meaning too, not written in stone, but breathed into being with each quiet kindness, each tiny defiance of indifference. So maybe meaning isn't found. Maybe it's made, slowly, imperfectly, without rules, without guarantees, not shouted from mountaintops, but whispered between people in ordinary moments. Maybe that's all we need. Not certainty, not cosmic purpose, just a way to hold the dark without closing our eyes, just a way to keep walking even when the road doesn't promise anything, just a way to say, I'm here, and to let that be enough. And if tonight feels heavy, if the weight of wondering has settled into your bones, you're not doing it wrong. You're simply alive, existing without a script, breathing without a reason, feeling everything and nothing all at once. You're not broken. You're just awake in a quiet universe. And sometimes that's the most honest thing there is. And maybe that's what this entire journey has been circling. Not some hidden truth buried in the stars, not a grand answer locked behind a veil, but this simple, soft realization that to be awake in the quiet and to stay awake is itself a rare kind of grace. You're not waiting for permission to exist. You already are. You don't need to earn this moment. It's already yours. And in a world that offers no cosmic explanation, no safety net of divine narrative, the fact that you still choose to feel, to remain open, to keep living gently, that might be the most powerful response you can give. It doesn't need to be celebrated. It doesn't need to be seen. But it is sacred. Not in the religious sense, but in the deeply human sense, in the sense that it touches something real inside you, something soft that doesn't ask for recognition, only room to breathe. And so, slowly, the narrative shifts from what's the point to what can I notice, from why am I here to how can I be here fully while I am. That shift is quiet, almost invisible from the outside, but inside it reshapes the whole landscape, because when you stop waiting for meaning to arrive, you begin to recognize the ways it already lives, beneath your fingertips, in the taste of food, in the way you exhale when you're finally alone. Even boredom begins to shimmer with possibility. Even sorrow feels a little less sharp. You begin to sense that this, whatever this is worth paying attention to, not for what it will become, but for what it already is. And in that attention life becomes less about achievement and more about intimacy. Intimacy with your own experience, with the people you love, with the tiny unnoticed details that make up a day. The way a window lets in golden light just before sunset. The sound of your feet on a wooden floor. The way your breath slows when someone holds you without needing to speak. These moments don't scream. They don't announce themselves. But they're there. They always were. You just weren't quiet enough to hear them. Until now. And even now, you don't need to rush. There's no urgency in presence. No race to become fully aware. Just this. One moment, then the next. And maybe you forget sometimes. Maybe you fall back into old patterns, rushing, doubting, feeling like you've missed something important. That's okay too. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to return again and again to what's real, to what's here. That act of returning without shame is its own kind of wisdom. It means you're paying attention. It means you still care. It means some part of you believes that being here in this ordinary moment is still worth it. And it is. It always was. Even when you couldn't see it. Even when it hurt. And maybe that's what makes this path so human. This constant forgetting and remembering. This ongoing process of waking up without ever staying awake for long. We blink. We drift. We come back. And every time we do, we have the chance to meet ourselves in a new way, not with judgment, but with curiosity, not with answers, but with space. That space becomes sacred, too. The space to feel deeply without needing to explain it. The space to hold sorrow without rushing to fix it. The space to feel joy without fearing how long it will last. You're not here to outsmart impermanence. You're here to meet it, to dance with it, to let it shape you gently as time passes and you keep unfolding into newer versions of yourself. And none of those versions need to be final. None of them need to be perfect. They just need to be honest, alive, present. Because that's what you are in this exact moment. Not a problem, not a project, just a person sitting or lying somewhere listening to this voice. And that is not nothing. That is not meaningless. That is real. You are real. And even in all the uncertainty, even with all the questions still unanswered, that truth remains. And maybe that truth, the simple, quiet truth of your presence, is what everything else was trying to point toward all along. Not the theories, not the doctrines, not the systems built to make sense of everything, but this, that you are here and you're feeling it. You're not a detached observer floating above your life, waiting to decode it. You're inside it, wading through it, feeling the weight and the lightness of being at the same time. You've carried questions that stretched farther than language. You've walked through days so dense they felt like fog and nights so silent they echoed. You've asked again and again whether any of this matters, and in asking, you've proven something quietly miraculous. You care. Even if it doesn't always feel that way, even if your mind tells you otherwise. Caring doesn't always come with clarity or purpose. Sometimes it arrives as a soft ache, a tension behind your eyes, a breath that catches in your throat for no obvious reason. That's not weakness. That's being human. And if meaning is hard to find, if the universe doesn't hand you a ready-made answer, then maybe meaning was never meant to be found. It was meant to be made. Not like a grand structure you build once and live inside forever, but like warmth in cold hands, like laughter that catches you by surprise, like kindness that asks nothing in return. Maybe meaning isn't a crown to wear, but a fire to sit beside, a presence that flickers into view when you stop trying so hard to capture it. You don't need to conquer your doubt to be real. You don't need to erase your confusion to be enough. The world may be vast, ancient, and indifferent, but still somehow your heart keeps beating. Your lungs keep breathing. Your body keeps reaching for what's next, even when you're tired, even when you're unsure, and that, in its quiet, unremarkable persistence, is a kind of defiance against the coldness, against the emptiness, against the pull of nihilism that says none of this matters. Maybe the point isn't to argue with that voice. Maybe the point is to outlive it, to keep living, feeling, creating, even in the absence of ultimate certainty. Maybe that's what it means to be free, not free from the void, but free within it, able to move through it with softness instead of fear, with curiosity instead of panic. Maybe the universe doesn't need us to be brave heroes or brilliant philosophers. Maybe it just needs us to be here, awake, aware, honest, breathing in and out with no greater goal than to be a part of it all. It's okay not to know what comes next. It's okay to carry your confusion like a lantern instead of a chain. When you feel the tug of despair, of futility, of that old inner whisper that asks, "What's the point?" Try not to push it away. Try not to fight it like an enemy. Instead, sit beside it. Listen. Let it speak. Often, when it's done, there's a silence that follows. And in that silence, something strange happens. You realize you're still here, still breathing, still listening. That silence is not empty. It's open, like the space between stars, like the moment before the music begins. It's the space where something else can emerge, not an answer necessarily, but a feeling, a presence, the beginning of something unnamed and yet already familiar. You've made it this far, not because the road was easy or the meaning obvious, but because somewhere inside you there's a thread that keeps going, a thread of wonder, of love, of aching, persistent hope. You've felt lost and still kept moving. You've questioned everything and still showed up, and that, just that, is beautiful. Maybe you'll never know if anything matters on the grandest scale. Maybe none of us will. But still, the world turns. The seasons shift. People laugh, cry, build, and dream. And you're part of that, a thread in the vast tapestry. You don't need to understand the whole pattern to see that your thread is real. The way you hold space for others, the way you endure, the way you notice the light changing through the window, the way you ask hard questions and still make tea. These things matter whether or not the cosmos agrees. So tonight, maybe you let go of needing the final word. Maybe you let go of the pressure to be certain. Instead, you let your uncertainty breathe. You let it rest beside you like an old friend. And maybe, in doing that, you'll discover something that no system, no theory, no cosmic blueprint could ever give you. A kind of peace. A peace that says, this is hard, and I'm still here. A peace that doesn't erase the darkness, but gently wraps a blanket around it. The truth is, you are not an answer waiting to be solved. You are a moment unfolding, a presence enduring, a question being lovingly asked by the universe itself. And somehow, impossibly, that is enough. And if that's enough, if your very being is enough, then maybe the pressure begins to soften. The pressure to perform, to prove, to constantly construct meaning like a fortress against the unknown. Maybe you realize you don't need to be profound to be alive. You don't need to transform every wound into wisdom or every silence into a statement. You just need to be honest. And honesty isn't always loud. Sometimes It's just staying in the room with your own thoughts long enough to hear what's underneath all the noise. Sometimes it's walking through a gray morning with no destination, letting the air touch your skin like it's the first time. Sometimes it's not trying to escape the emptiness, but just noticing that it's there and that you're still breathing, still here, still part of this strange, unfolding world. See, nihilism often arrives like a storm. It crashes through, tears down everything you built, and leaves you staring at the wreckage of your beliefs, your hopes, your sense of direction. And in that moment, it's easy to think the storm is the end. That meaninglessness is a void you fall into and never crawl out from. But maybe nihilism isn't an ending. Maybe it's a clearing, a space where old scaffolding collapses, and in the quiet that follows, you can hear your own voice again. Not the one shaped by expectations or echoed from others, but the small, steady one that belongs only to you. We often think we need answers to move forward, that we need to fill the silence with a plan, a goal, a reason. But what if you don't? What if being alive doesn't need a justification? What if the raw, breath-filled reality of existence is itself enough to keep going, not because it's perfect, but because it's real? Because you're real. The hunger in your chest, the ache in your bones, the strange beauty of seeing your reflection and realizing it's you, alive, uncertain, and still waking up to the day. Maybe that's where freedom lives, not in knowing everything or fixing everything, but in standing inside the question and still choosing to live, to love, to try, to sit beside someone in silence and not explain the silence away, to laugh without wondering whether laughter changes anything, to cry without needing your tears to mean something, to just feel what you feel and let it rise and fall like weather, like waves, like breath. Because in the end, maybe nihilism doesn't erase meaning. Maybe it strips away all the borrowed meanings, the ones handed to you by culture, by fear, by habit, and leaves you holding a mirror. What do you see? Not a solution, not a path, just you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Not because you've conquered the void, but because you've learned how to sit beside it without flinching. Not because you've solved the mystery, but because you've realized you don't have to. You can just live it. And in living it, you might begin to notice small things, things that don't need to justify themselves to matter. The warmth of tea held between cold hands, the rhythm of rain against a window, the way someone you love breathes when they're finally asleep. These moments don't explain the universe. They don't defeat despair, but they exist, and you exist inside them. And sometimes that's the only truth that matters. So when nihilism whispers that nothing matters, maybe you whisper back, not as a protest, not as a declaration, but as a gentle truth. Then I get to choose what does. Maybe that's not power in the usual sense. It's not certainty or control. But it is freedom. And maybe freedom isn't the absence of pain or confusion, but the presence of awareness, of quiet courage, of choosing to stay with yourself even when everything feels unclear. So if you're here, listening, breathing, wondering, then you're already doing the thing that matters most. You're being. And being in a world that often demands performance or perfection is quietly radical. So sit here a little longer, not to reach a conclusion, just to be with this moment, with yourself, with the not knowing. You don't have to move yet. You don't have to understand. Just breathe. And so you sit, not because anything has been resolved, but because you no longer need resolution to rest. The silence doesn't demand a response. It doesn't tug at you the way it used to. It just exists, like the sky, like the space between your thoughts, like the breath you didn't realize you were still taking. And maybe, in this stillness, you begin to see it all differently. The weight of having to figure it out begins to lift, not because you found the answer, but because you realize you're allowed to stop looking, not forever, not with indifference, but with grace, with the simple understanding that life is not a riddle to solve, but a rhythm to move within. The mind still tries to bring up questions. What now? What next? What does this mean? But the body knows differently. The body, grounded and warm and so often overlooked, understands that presence is enough. You shift in your seat or you lie quietly, and the world continues, not in chaos, not in clarity, just in motion. Trees still breathe, light still bends. Somewhere, someone laughs. Somewhere else, someone weeps. All of it happening at once. All of it part of this strange, unscripted reality you belong to. And you begin to understand you were never required to carry all of it. You were never meant to hold the full meaning of existence on your shoulders. That was never the assignment. You were only ever asked to live, not perfectly, not dramatically, just honestly, moment by moment. You might never change the world. You might never write the words that make it all click into place. But every time you choose to stay present in a life that doesn't guarantee answers, you do something profound. You participate. You bear witness. You say, without saying, I was here, I felt it, I didn't run. That's not giving up. That's the beginning of peace. Because real peace doesn't arrive in the form of a conclusion. It arrives in the absence of urgency, in the freedom to let go without shutting down, in the quiet agreement between you and the universe that you can both exist side by side without explanation. And when you feel lost again, because you will, it won't feel the same. Not because you're stronger or wiser or more enlightened, but because now, even in the fog, you'll remember what's beneath it. You'll remember that confusion isn't a flaw. It's a part of the rhythm. That doubt doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're still awake, still feeling, still moving through it all with your eyes open. And maybe you'll begin to see your life not as a linear story, but as a collection of moments, some quiet, some loud, some unbearably tender, and you'll begin to trust that these moments don't need to be measured to matter. You'll find yourself noticing things again, the way someone looks away before they speak, the way your chest loosens when you forgive yourself, just a little, the way the morning light makes even your messy room feel gentle. And these small recognitions, these tiny returns to presence, will become your home. Not because they solve anything, but because they ask nothing. They just are, like you, and maybe that's what meaning really is. Not something we chase, but something we notice. A feeling that grows not from understanding the whole picture, but from loving what little of it we can see. And if you've made it here, through all the spirals and stillness and space, then maybe you've already begun. Maybe the work of your life isn't to reach a conclusion, but to stay present in the question. Maybe it's not about building a life that makes sense to everyone else, but one that feels honest to you. You don't owe the world an answer. You don't owe your past self a blueprint. You owe only this, to keep choosing presence over performance, to keep returning to yourself when it would be easier to abandon, to keep breathing even when it's just one shallow inhale at a time. You are not a puzzle. You are not a project. You are not a theory to be proven. You are a breath, a moment, a fragment of light moving through time, And that is not a failure. That is a miracle. So if tonight you feel small or tired or unfinished, let that be okay. Let that be more than okay. Let it be beautiful. You are not a god. You are not a machine. You are a person, soft, tired, curious, and that is more than enough. Let yourself rest. Let yourself not know. Let yourself be. And in doing that, you may discover the most radical truth of all, that you were never meant to find the meaning. You were meant to feel it, briefly, sharply, quietly, and then, without fanfare, to let it go. Just as it came, just as you came, and just as you are.